In late 2020, I bought myself an early Christmas gift, what I think is the best MIDI controller keyboard you can get, the Arturia KeyLab 88 Mark II. Hi folks, I'm Mike, and I hope you're well. So what would be the ideal MIDI controller keyboard for me? Well, it should have an excellent quality keybed for a start and 88 keys, so I've always got access to the full range of any instrument, as well as easy access to some key switches. And I do want control over those instruments, so I want lots of knobs, buttons and sliders to do that. It's also nice to have full control over my DAW and not have to reach awkwardly when I'm taking and retaking many times. It's very nice if it's got some drum pads as well, so I don't have to have additional hardware. It should have great connectivity, really excellent software, and the build quality should be very good indeed. I want this to last for years. So, does such a keyboard exist? Well, I think it does with the Arturia KeyLab 88 Mark II. To see why, let's start off by taking a look at the hardware. The KeyLab 88 Mark II is no lightweight. As its name suggests, it's an 88 key keyboard with full-size keys. The size and the fact that its main casing is metal gives it weight and a sense of solid durability. Whilst the aesthetic touches like the wood inlay and general styling are nice, it's the functionality of the hardware design which impresses me. Take for example the nicely styled detachable music stand. There's a handy slot there for when you want to use your tablet and have a charging cable pass through. Then there's the detachable platform to accommodate the laptop on the left, more than just an afterthought for the modern musician. By the way, when attaching and detaching these items, you get a real sense of wonderful build quality. That follows through to things like the metal mod and pitch wheels and the wonderfully rubberized feel to the controls and drum pads. But the real quality of this device is in exactly the place where you want it to be, the keyboard. I personally find that a piano-style weighted keyboard is much more expressive, and I've used them for many years. Arturia have gone all out with this superb quality Fatar TP100LR keybed, a weighted aftertouch-enabled keyboard with real moving mechanical parts. Now, in fairness, how good a keyboard feels is very subjective, and each player will have a different opinion. I would not describe this as super heavy feeling so much as slightly on the heavier side, which I personally love, as that feeling of resistance gives me a sense of more control over the velocity. One way or another, I doubt that anyone could describe this as anything other than a high quality keyboard. As I mentioned earlier, having the full 88 keys means I don't feel restricted. This is especially true for me when it comes to key switches, often found in the lower octaves. Too often I find that they're not available while still playing a part, even on 61 key keyboards. Sure, it means the keyboard isn't going to go in my backpack anytime soon, but this is very much a studio tool for me, making this feature rather perfect. Having DAW controls at your fingertips is definitely an advantage when recording and re-recording parts, especially with a large keyboard like this, where many of you may have to have it off to the side of your desk, just out of reach of your computer. Even for me, with a large keyboard drawer in my desk, it still saves me reaching awkwardly forward to control my DAW. A number of quality magnetic overlays are included for popular DAWs, but the fact that this uses the standard MKii and HUI protocols mean that you have compatibility with most DAWs. Apart from the standard useful transport controls, we can also use the wheel as a jog wheel, and depending on the DAW, other buttons will be mapped to useful automation features, mute, solo, save, and the one that I seem to use most, undo. But we're not limited to transport controls. The group of 9 sliders act as 8 faders in your DAW's mixer, plus 1 for the master fader. We can move through banks to control all of the faders in our DAW. The top encoders control pan for each channel, and the buttons below select a channel so that you can go ahead and mute, solo, record, etc. with that channel. Let's not forget that these knob sliders and buttons also act as CC controllers. For those new to this, it simply means that we can send values via MIDI to control various aspects of a virtual instrument or maybe another connected device. Perhaps you want to use a knob or a slider to control some aspect of a synth, or as a drawbar on a Hammond organ. Details of MIDI messages we're sending are shown in the main display. Although we can often configure these with our DAW or plugin, as we will see later, the included software software enables a very high degree of customization. I feel like it's highly desirable to have some decent drum pads at hand. You may not like the feel of weighted keys when it comes to recording drum parts, so the pads can be a welcome feature. Actually, Arturia have really delivered here. These are nice feeling pads with plenty of expression, and they've got aftertouch. The pad colors are configurable via the included software, which I guess could be really helpful in assisting you with various drum maps. Apart from being used as drum triggers, these pads can also be used to trigger stored chords or select chords to be played on the keyboard. Before we move on to the really impressive software, I just want to mention connectivity. We can optionally use a power supply, especially useful when hooking up to other hardware, but for most of us, we'll connect to a computer via USB and we'll get our power from that. Next, we see a CV in connector, where we can use a control voltage output from a modular synth, allowing us CV to MIDI and CV to USB conversions. Whilst we often see connections for sustain pedals, here we also see one for expression. Next to this, we see 4 other pedal inputs assignable to any CC controls we wish. I don't think I've seen any other keyboard with this number of foot switch options. Very impressive. Of course, we have 2 standard MIDI DIN connectors, and lastly we see pitch gate and mod CV outputs, where we can send configurable voltage ranges to modular synths. All in all, I'm not aware of any other controller that has such a comprehensive range of connections, and in a studio, you never know what you're going to need to connect to in the future. As I mentioned before, we have a great degree of configurability via the MIDI Control Center software, and Arturia have made this super intuitive. With the visual representation of your keyboard, you simply click on a control to change its settings. For example, click on this slider and I can change its behavior from a slider to a drawbar, or change its CC number. We could click on the keyboard, for example, to change the velocity curve or set up split options. In another example, we can set up the colors for our drum pads. Configurations can be saved in user templates and then synced to the keyboard, making it easy to switch between setups depending on the situation. As much as I love the MIDI Control Center, it's another piece of included software which I think adds tremendous value: Analog Lab 5. Analog Lab 5 is a sensational collection of pianos, classic synths, organs and other vintage keys, which oozes in quality. But it's more than just bundled software. It integrates with the KeyLab in 2 key ways. Firstly, when we load an instrument up, it configures the knobs and sliders to work with that instrument or preset in useful ways, saving you a lot of time and effort. Secondly, we have dedicated functionality on the keyboard to navigate through the software using the buttons and scroll wheel. When you consider the quality of the 7,000 included sounds, this is a massive addition to the keyboard. As well as Analog Lab, we also get the wonderful Piano V, Whirly V and Vox Continental V. So before we move on to my conclusion, if you have found this video useful at all, go ahead and hit the like button for me. Do it right away so that you don't forget. Also, if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you're notified about my other videos. So, I have to tell you, this is by far my favorite purchase of 2020, and I do believe it's the best MIDI controller keyboard that you can get. The closest competitor for me was the Native Instruments S58 Mark II. Now that does have a nice colour screen and it integrates with complete control. However, I think the Arturia beat it in terms of the fact that it's got the drum pads, it's got extra connectivity, it's got extra sliders, knobs and buttons, so I've got more control over my instruments. I think the door control is superior. It's got really good included software and it's got an amazing build quality in terms of the hardware and a great design there as well. And by the way, they also do a black version now if you don't like that kind of white color. Now in terms of price, of course, this is not a cheap or a budget keyboard. Arturia have packed it with excellent quality hardware and software, and at some point you do have to pay the price for that. But I don't think it's a purchase that you'll regret. Check the links in the description down below for some prices in different parts of the world. Also, while you're down there, check my link for patreon.com, where for as little as $1 per month you can help me help you by making more videos like this. And I'll see you in the next video.